Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to participate in this debate. I want to say, first of all, that I support the motion before the House. I want to say at the outset that this debate has absolutely nothing to do with the support of Canadian soldiers in the field, and having been to Afghanistan on 2 occasions, I can tell you that they are the highest quality, the highest standards, and that our men and women deserve, and I know get the support of all members in this House. The issue is, Mr. Speaker, about the conduct of policy of the Government of Canada. It's about the direction that this government is going. And as the Vice Chair of both the Defence Committee and the Afghan Committee, I find it very troubling that we are not able to have the documentation that we need in order to do our job. Apparently others have that right, and whether they be former generals, whether they be people in the press, but the members of the committee which are charged with the responsibility of looking into this issue, into these allegations, do not have the documentation. Now, this Parliament passed a resolution in 2008, and I want to read one part of it to you, Mr. Speaker, to the House. Commit to meeting the highest NATO and international standards with respect to protecting the rights of detainees, transferring only when it believes it can do so in keeping with Canada's international obligation. That is what this House passed, and members on the other side voted for that. That is our moral responsibility and, indeed, our legal responsibility, both under the Geneva Convention and the Articles of War. Now, we've heard from the other side, Mr. Speaker, that somehow, while the 2005 agreement was clearly not adequate and they brought in a tougher one later on. Well, nobody's disputing that. The question is, both from the generals who appeared before us, from Mr. Mulroney and others, is that we really didn't know what we were getting into in 2005. But clearly, if there was a problem, why did that government across the way decide to change the agreement, to amend the agreement? If there was no abuse, and no one can categorically say that there wasn't, then why did we have to amend it? Well, we had to amend it because obviously there were issues out there. Now, Mr. Speaker, in one of these redacted documents, and again, when you're reading something with all this black in it, it's very difficult. But in one of the memos, and I don't even know the date, Mr. Speaker, because unfortunately it's blacked out, under 19, it says, apart from, this is from Mr. Colvin's email, which was copied to Mr. Mulroney, Colleen Swords, and others, apart from non-access to detention facilities themselves, the main difficulty we faced was in correctly identifying our detainees. Then it's blacked out. Then it says, explained that they had no list of information in our possession was quite limited. The names are written only in English, not in Pashto. We had no photos or other descriptions of detainees, only their age, the name of the village, not even the district in, again blacked out, of the blacked out, only in blacked out, and it goes on. So from that, Mr. Speaker, clearly there is either something to hide, or the fact is that we did not know what we were transferring. But certainly the International Red Cross did. Certainly the Americans did, and others did. And that, I am sure that pressure was brought to bear, and why the government decided to change the agreement. Well, the agreement that was entered in 2005 was to meet what we thought at the time. The new agreement that came in, and clearly there was allegations out there, and these allegations made by Mr. Colvin and others. Now, Mr. Colvin is a respected public servant. The generals before us are all well respected. No one has any question about that. The question is, what did the government know? What information did they have, and what did they do with that information when they got it? Well, very clearly, the government seems to be, if they have nothing to hide, then why does the government not allow a full public inquiry? That would also be very helpful both to those who have come forward on both sides of this issue, but also because we as a committee, and I think this is very important, we as a committee are constrained in our ability to be able to seek the answers because A, we don't have the documentation, and because we have 7 minutes in which to ask questions. And I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, it's pretty hard to get the question and the answer to what you're looking for in 7 minutes. And I know that that is a difficult situation for at least for these members. Now, maybe on the other side, some members there have seen these documents in an entirety. They claim they haven't. But I find it very interesting, that at this point we say a public inquiry because we are not able to function. In fact, it seems like a Hollywood backdrop, Mr. Speaker. You have people come in. There's certain people are briefed on this information who come before the committee. The members try their best, but at the end of the day, we don't have the information we need. So this is also a moral issue, Mr. Speaker. We have a moral obligation to Canadians to make sure that we are extremely above board. And the government clearly, if they were not needing to hide anything, would certainly make these documents available, certainly to the members of the committee, but also would be forthright in saying, okay, there is a conflict here. We have a situation where the former defence minister indicated he knew nothing that happened, and yet 19 memos were sent to the government indicating that there were concerns of torture. And then we have the current minister who's changed his mind from time to time depending on the situation. My mother used to say, never be and I can't use the word, Mr. Speaker, but don't be a prevaricator of the truth. Because if you're a prevaricator of the truth, you're going to have to remember what you said or not said at some point. And so it's better to simply say what you know, tell the truth right up front. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, we don't seem to be able to get the answers we need. Is the government covering up? Well, one would assume that if you're not prepared to release the documentation, if you're not prepared to be forthright, that's the only conclusion one can come to. Again, Mr. Speaker, we look at our international responsibilities. And again, our soldiers are performing extremely well in the field. And we know that our soldiers are taught very strongly and of course are schooled about what to do when they have a prisoner. And so there are concerns about when these people are turned over to Afghan jails. No one is suggesting that Afghan jails are top-notch. In fact, they're a disaster. We know they're a disaster. And that is why on several occasions, at least 3 occasions, the transfers were stopped. If they were not stopped, Mr. Speaker, then everything would have been fine. But clearly they were stopped because there were these allegations out there. And I find it hard to believe, as a member of Parliament, that the government didn't know, because otherwise you don't stop something if everything is fine. But, we hear, again, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we listen when government members stand up. On that side of the House, we hear these catcalls. Now, I have to say, if you really want to have a thorough and full debate, then, listen. Even if you don't like it, listen. Because at least at the committee, we try to, again, extend the same courtesy across the aisle. But the government is stonewalling. We saw what happened to the Military Police Complaints Commission. Another example of where they were thwarted from doing their job because of the situation. I should point out, by the way, Mr. Speaker, that my friend and colleague, the member from Esquimalt, Wanda Fuca, will be splitting time with me. And I want to point out to you, Mr. Speaker, that the Special Standing Committee in Afghanistan is not able to do its job because it doesn't have the tools to do it. And unfortunately, although I think everyone on the committee is certainly of good intentions, you cannot do that. So the issue now comes down to we have certain people saying one thing, certain people saying another thing. We need to be able to say to Canadians, and only through a full public inquiry where the documentation can be provided, where we can actually get the answers, and not in 7 minutes, so that we can actually move forward on this issue. And again, I refer to that resolution, Mr. Speaker, that Parliament supported. And again, it referred to protecting the rights of detainees. We, have to walk the talk. We can't simply say that we pass a resolution and then we're going to ignore what is in that resolution. We have a responsibility, and I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that if the government has nothing to hide, call a public inquiry, let's find out the real facts, and then not only will Parliament know, but certainly Canadians will know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.